Do they hear that?
They hear this.
Oh, they hear this now?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Sweet. Perfect. So we are with Josh Shelton today with the Community Emergency Response Team. Josh, how are you doing this fine Sunday morning?
Just fine. Thank you very much.
Like, seriously, thank you so much for coming out here because this is kind of an interesting thing to go about because, like, natural disasters don't necessarily happen that often here, and especially in this area that I've, but everyone does expect something along the lines of this to happen. And what does the Community Emergency Response Team do to kind of help that sort of thing?
Well, the Community Emergency Response Team is, and CERT as it's called, it's a volunteer group. I'm more so associated with City of Tacoma Emergency Management.
Go ahead and walk, just right up into it.
And so that's one of our volunteer organizations within the city. So as a Community Emergency Response Team member, you could potentially be preparing for a disaster any way you can before first responders arrive. That's really the whole point of the training. And the training is about 20 hours. We do 3 to 4 classes per year. And you learn different things such as fire safety, utility safety, like what to do if there's a power line down on your car, some interesting things like that.
And actually, that's really good to know because we recently just had the windstorm, and you don't necessarily consider that, like a natural disaster sort of thing, but you need to have this training because something like that could happen. And then you get the random people walking up and saying, there's a power line that's down right there. I should just walk by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely steer clear of those. And you make a great point that we also try to make as well. It's not always going to be the big earthquake. It could be an ice storm on the highway. It could be the windstorm like you saw. Now we know tornadoes can hit this area pretty significantly. That used to not be something I talked about at all, like hurricanes, and now we have to worry about one more thing apparently. So
that was insane. I remember sending a video to my wife and just showing it because she's like, "That's not something that happens," and I'm like, "No, here is the people sitting in the Walmart parking lot saying, well, this is happening."
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to prepare for anything, whether it's the city or the CERT team. We call it the all hazards approach. So you can't have a different plan for every possible thing that could ever happen. It's just not possible.
That makes sense in those sort of terms. You have kind of something that will encompass everything just in case one of those things happen.
Yeah, of course. And each disaster will have its unique issues to address, but there's the core preparedness that you're going to want to be ready for anything when the time comes.
What is the history of CERT? Is this how long has CERT been going on?
CERT's been around since the 80s.
Okay.
I started in Los Angeles, and I think as a response to some of their earthquakes. And then that became a federal program. So there are several CERT programs throughout the area and across the nation as well. So some CERT programs, members will participate with the fire department. We don't integrate like that, but we do staff some events. Like we had a CERT team for the Hilltop Street Fair, for example. So it's not always just disaster response. It's a trained workforce that does have some skills that can help in event management, Freedom Fair, that kind of thing, and some other volunteer opportunities.
And how did you get become involved with CERT?
Well, I was actually taking the class. I transitioned into the profession of emergency management in the last couple of years, so I was just trying to get some experience. I worked at the American Red Cross in the biomedical world previously, but and that led me to some volunteering with disaster relief, and then I was trying to just get some time in so I could pursue a new career in emergency management. I was taking the CERT class, being instructed by my now boss, Uta, who is the emergency manager of Tacoma. So it was just good timing, and that class led to my current job. So win-win for that.
Absolutely. Now, you did talk about you try to get there, or not necessarily get there, but you are there as the emergency crews or as the first responders might be. So if something is happening while you're there, someone with CERT training is if you see it happen, you're there and you can kind of coordinate. Now, what do you do before the first responders get there as a group of people?
Yeah, that's exactly the goal of the program. If there's a big disaster, it might be several days, and we're even training up to 2 weeks before first responders may get to you.
Wow,
So
okay.
what's going to realistically happen if there was a large earthquake? the fire department, they're going to canvass the neighborhood. They're going to go to the life-threatening emergency situations. Just because you don't have power and you're stuck in your home, if you're safe, not going to die, you're going to have to hang tough for a while.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a misconception. First responders are overstaffed as it is. If there are several fires at once, that could certainly stretch our capacity. If the whole city is having some trouble, they're going to really have to triage and focus on life safety and major property damage and issues before they get to the general public. So as a CERT member and as any community member, you want to be able to sustain yourself for potentially a few days, if not more. So we certainly want to focus on having food, water, disaster supplies, have yourself taken care of. And as a CERT member, the goal is to help you organize, start to mobilize your neighborhood. And even if you don't have other CERT team members around you, you might be the coordinating person for your block, for example. So a big part of it is, checking utilities in the area, make sure there are no leaks, check on people that might need some extra assistance. Maybe there's an elderly lady that isn't going to be able to get out of her home. Maybe there are some small children that might need some help. So just being mindful of your neighborhood and maybe some special needs or concerns in the area.
And I think that's a really good point just to make. I mean, I've already said it a million times on this podcast, but I recently just bought a house in Tacoma. And one of the things I made sure to do, and I didn't necessarily do when I was a renter, which thinking back on it, I really should have done anyway, was introduce myself to all of the neighbors, at least the ones that are like all around me. And it was just a simple thing as like, hey, I'm going to have a housewarming if you would like to come over. But even just getting to know their names on their front porch or talking with them every once in a while, getting to know your neighbors is really essentially like a first step when you're doing this sort of thing, because like you just said, you need to know which neighbors may be able to help you in certain things, be able to do certain stuff. Like one of my neighbors works in construction, so I know he can actually lift this stuff and do some helping out.
Yeah.
But we have some of the older ones as well who have been living there for almost 60, 70 years at this point, and you're going to need to know that they're the ones that might need help first because they might have the medications they need or all those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of it, just being familiar with people's skills. A lot of people have a lot of unique abilities that you might not know about, whether it's a doctor, a nurse, construction, like you said. And we actually do have a program that's put on by the state. It's called Map Your Neighborhood, and I've coordinated some.
Oh, neat.
And basically it's just doing what you described. You hand out flyers, invite your neighbors, whether you know them or not, to your home. And I've done these maybe 10 to 15 people, and your neighbors come over, you watch a video that is basically like CERT. It's kind of the boiled down 90-minute video version, and it follows a disaster scenario. And along the way, you pause and discuss some of the capabilities in your neighborhood. And it's called Map Your Neighborhood. You do actually draw out your neighbors' houses.
Sweet.
So you can identify where utilities are, different things like that. But overall, the bigger point is, just like you mentioned, become more familiar with your neighbors. When the time comes, you'll work better together. We practice the same thing in emergency management. We're always coordinating with each other. You don't want to meet these people for the first time in an emergency situation.
Right,
you want to be familiar with each other, have those points of contacts, and be able to kind of seamlessly transition into a functional team when this happens. We don't expect residents to be experts, but just a little bit of training goes a long way with reducing panic, helping you get through that situation until professional help can arrive.
You just said like reducing panic, and it just made me think it's like one of the worst things you can say to someone when everything is going down is, "Hey, calm down." Like, do you know any like just simple ways to like try to take control of a situation, or at least stop everybody from freaking out?
Yeah, and it is interesting. It turns out in reality, people are less likely to just freak out. They're more likely to become a little more paralyzed, I might say.
Oh, good call, yeah.
Don't want to do the wrong thing. So most people aren't, exceptions to every rule, running around, screaming. The majority are.
I just watched the Fire Festival documentary, and it was like all these like YouTubers and Instagram people stuck on an island, and no, it went Lord of the Flies really, really, really fast. So I mean, I'm hoping like normal people won't do that, but gosh, man, it was like people like stealing beds out of tents, and like I was like, come on, guys, really, you really need to do this?
I'm not saying it can't happen. That's not the overwhelming response from the public. People do that though.
Yeah. But so just like a general way is just to kind of like maybe get people to go like, hey, it's like, I know that you're paralyzed with fear, but well, maybe not tell them that. Yeah, okay, Scott. But like, it's just like, okay, do this. Like, give them a small task to do to kind of get them into it.
Yep, absolutely. And it might not even be fear. It might just be not knowing what to do. So a big part of my job in city government is providing that information, whether you've been trained or not, or you're ready or not. If there was an earthquake or a major situation here, it is up to us to communicate in every way we can to ensure that you have some direction. So if people don't know what to do, they'll start just coming up with things on the fly. May or may not be the safest thing for them. And eventually that could lead to people stealing from each other, like once you're truly in a desperate situation. So it's up to us as the fire department, as the government, law enforcement, to ensure that we're communicating with these people to let them know if they should find a shelter, if they should stay inside, what to expect, how long it's going to be. So you've seen it on TV where the alert messages come on, and we're doing more and more things with cell phones, trying to reach people in other languages. Sign language, all different.
So how is that working out for you guys? I mean, there is like it's a bit of a melting pot here, and we have from all over many different languages, and then I know that there's just from all reaches, and it's kind of hard to kind of pinpoint down specific languages. I know that is a lot of pictorials or stuff like that, or how are you figuring that out?
Yeah, we're right in the middle of those challenges, and we don't have it solved quite yet. It's an ongoing process. I'm personally involved with Pierce County and some work groups that are trying to meet with different groups like Korean Women's Association, Central Latino, to find out how some of these cultures that are not native English speakers are actually receiving their information. Not everyone's going to trust government officials. They might trust their church groups or different organizations or community leaders. So we want to make sure we're getting information to those people that they can pass on to other members of their community. And as far as the languages, we are required by law to get emergency communications out to, for Tacoma, it's the top 10 languages. It's basically if it's 5% of your population or 1,000 people, something like that. So we do have a specific list of languages for this area, which amounts to 10. Seattle, I think, has 40 languages that meet that criteria. So you can imagine sending out an evacuation warning. You just can't do it in 40 languages.
No.
So we're really trying to reach different avenues, follow different ways to get this information out.
It just essentially reminds me of the one placard you get in like an electronics piece you get that has every single language, and it's just one info sheet, but it's done exactly like 40 different times. It's hard to do with a company that makes $1 million or millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, but then you're using this as with the government funding and trying to make sure and allocate the money in the correct ways. It makes it kind of hard for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are looking at pictograms. I know Japan uses that system pretty successfully, and things like Google Translate, some of those apps, they're getting closer. They're not quite accurate enough to where we can legally use them. I mean, it gets the point across. You're welcome to use whatever apps you want, but we as a government can't quite rely on those yet. But we work closely with partners like that, trying to work this out. So it's not easy, but it's certainly something that we're very mindful of, and we do what we can. We'll follow our plans and just do it on the spot if we need to. So hopefully people, and that's part of being prepared, if you can get by a little longer if you maybe didn't get that message, or
or just trying to figure it out and wait and see what's going on.
Rely on your neighbors. That'd be another example of just being familiar with, if there's a non-English speaker on your block that maybe they didn't get the message, or they don't have a TV or a cell phone. So spread the word.
And that's one of those things too. It's like, and I know it's really hard for me because I have a bit of social awkwardness, and I feel weird going and just talking to people, and especially when you're trying to bridge something like that, or if you've got a neighbor who you've maybe never literally seen, out of their house, and it's trying to engage with those people. And it might just be as simple as just leaving a note or something and saying, hey, if you've got any questions or anything, please say something. Please come and say hi.
Yeah, but you've talked to your new neighbors, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that bad, right?
No, they were great.
See?
But there's one neighbor that I've seen exactly once. I didn't even realize someone actually lived there until I saw him get his mail one time. That at the same time I was.
That's a great neighbor right there.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Just joking.
Yeah, and that's not unusual, but the more you know about your neighborhood, the better. And a lot of people, in this transitional nature of people's lives, just they move, they don't bother to meet their neighbors, or people drive into their garage, shut the door, and that's okay. When the time comes, it's human nature to help those people, even though maybe you haven't talked to them, but if you can run into them in advance, and like I said, that Map Your Neighborhood program, that's a good opportunity to have a legitimate invitation instead of just that weird guy down the road inviting me to his house for some reason.
Hey, would you like to come over? Why? No reason. I mean, we're just mapping the neighborhood. What? A little more information, please. We're talking with Josh from the Community Emergency Response Team. That is CERT. And we're just trying to talk about keeping yourself prepared and really when maybe not the big one is going to happen, but a problem in your neighborhood, in your community. And where can people find out more information if they just want to browse and maybe find out where some of the training courses are happening?
Yeah, absolutely. If you just search Tacoma CERT, we've got a website. It's a little outdated, and for that I apologize, but the information's there, and you can always email me. My information is on that as well.
Perfect.
You can just search emergency management, Tacoma, Pierce County, state emergency management. There's a lot of information out there. We don't want this to be a secret for anyone. So just search disaster preparedness, fill in the name of your town, and you'll probably get some good points of contact. Mine will be one of those, and I'll be happy to discuss any of these things further with anyone who contacts me.
Yeah, you were really easy to find, and then they had certain places all over the country, and some of them stood for different things. They had community or citizens. A lot of them had different acronyms, but I found all kinds of them on there, so people should definitely look.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a class coming up, and like I said, we have about three per year. We usually will do one privately. For example, we trained the security staff at Tacoma Community College last year. So we like to work with schools and some local businesses that have an extra interest in that.
Yeah, if you're a business owner, it's I don't want to say, oh, you should absolutely do this, but it feels like you have a bit of an obligation to be doing this for your workers and for yourself, because people spend more. I mean, you're not always at home, and you're not always going to be dealing with your neighbors. You're going to be at work, and sometimes it's going to be, maybe you're opening the store and an earthquake happens, or the windstorm shows up, and like at Wizards Keep Games, it didn't have any power, and he's like, I don't know what to do, and his poor Brogan's employee was like, I don't know what to do, and you're like, well, go home. It's like one of those things. So it should be one of those, because I mean, essentially, you're spending a third of your life at work if you work a normal 8-hour job, and sometimes even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And 40% of businesses fail after a disaster just due to some of these preparedness issues, whether it's payroll or staff can't get back to work, whatever the case may be. There are many reasons. So definitely, if you have a business out there, look into some planning. It's good to have some of these things in mind. And as you said, people often think that they're going to be home when this happens, but you're probably home half the time. So you want to have a little kit in your car. You might be on the side of the road in a nice storm. You are at work a third of your day at least, so you've got a third of a chance that that's going to happen there. So have a little bit, and see what your business has, and you're going to want some personal supplies as well.
And so when you talk about the preparedness on that, what do you think you should have in a car? I mean, I know if you're like going over the pass, you want to have like the warm jacket and some blankets, and maybe even have those just normally. But in terms of like water or and stuff like that, like what do you recommend that people have in their car at all times, just in case something happens?
Yeah, and obviously you can't fill up your whole trunk with your survival kit. So we understand that we need to be realistic about it, but just I like to be practical. If you're on the side of the highway and it's 30 degrees out for 8 hours, what are you going to want?
Yeah,
probably going to want a little bit of food, have some granola bars, have several bottles of water, blankets for sure. I mean, food, water, and warmth, that can get you through a day for sure. So, and flashlights, of course, you always want to have, but that's a good one. And if you have an extra battery charger.
There's Tacoma.
And a real fast car.
Get out fast car to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has cell phones, so you don't want that to to run out. So I like to recommend backup battery chargers, and that'll keep you in communication with people.
That's a really good point too, and I love like I just recently got a new battery charger, and it's one of those things that is like, I don't know, you're not going to have a plug-in. You're not going to have these certain things that are going to be able to keep your car or keep your batteries running, or like you can't keep your car running all the time, or eventually you're going to have to not be able to do that.
Yeah, you don't want to kill your battery that you're going to need
just
later.
To charge your phone.
Watch YouTube.
Right.
But make your own decisions, but
you gotta do something when you're parked on the side of the road for 30 hours, man.
Now, what do you recommend when it is a home situation for supplies? Because I remember having the neighbors next door that their garage, the walls were canned food and bottled water, and I thought that was a bit excessive. But now that I have a garage that has room, I'm kind of like, that really isn't that bad of an idea.
I could be trapped in my house for a week. How much food could I eat?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we talk about 2 weeks ready. So have food and water and supplies for 2 weeks. And what that amounts to is a gallon of water per person per day for 2 weeks, which is a lot.
Okay, that is a lot, yeah.
But that includes cooking, hygiene. You can survive on less. And in a pinch, there's water in your hot water heater. That might be 50 or 100 gallons.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Eventually, if you've lost power, your hot showers will be gone. You can just drink that water if you need to. But, a gallon per person per day. Don't forget about your pets. They're going to be right there with you. So have food and water for them as well.
That's a good point with the pets, though, because the recent fires in Northern California, I was watching a comedian, Whitney Cummings. She was on her Instagram, and it was her doing kind of an all call, but she was like, I am in this area. If you had to leave and you had to leave your pets, send me a message, or if you know someone who did, send me a message so we can go and look up those. A lot of people, when they'll go, I mean, it sucks, but they're saving themselves and sometimes leaving their pets behind. What do you do with pets in an evacuation scenario?
Yeah, we learned a lot from Hurricane Katrina. People were not evacuating because they didn't necessarily have a place for their pets to go or a way for their pets to be transferred or transported. So it's federal law now that we in emergency management make accommodations for pets for evacuation.
Awesome.
Through the transportation, and then when you get to a shelter, sometimes you can shelter with your pet, near your pet, but we need to do something. It just kind of depends on the facility. So we need to make those arrangements, but you also need to be prepared to leave with your pet. So one good recommendation is, if you have a crate, don't throw your cat or dog in that thing for the first time when under a stressful environment. If they're not used to riding around in that, let them hang out a little bit. So when they're sensing your panic, for example, they're not going to reflect that. They'll just think they're going for another drive, and then they'll show up at the shelter or grandma's house or wherever the case may be.
Anywhere on that.
Well, that's why I only have pets that I can eat.
Oh,
so it
Jeff,
saves.
Smart, dude.
I mean,
That's what I'm just saying.
I mean, you're not technically wrong, but also there's no way I'm eating my cats. You're just rude. You're terrible. You're horrifying.
Named your pig Bacon.
So if people do want to do this training, you said a couple times a year they're able to do so, and all the information if they want to, they can just ask you for that sort of stuff.
Yep, it's right on the website. You register, I'll get a application directly, and we fill it just based on first come, first served. We technically have to give priority to City of Tacoma residents, but I just give them a week head start, and anyone else from neighboring communities. We'd rather have a full class than, because there are some areas that don't have these programs. And if you're willing to drive and we've got space, which we usually do, like I said, just have to give Tacoma priority, and then I'll be happy to take anyone willing to join us.
I'm pretty interested in this, and I think my wife would be too.
I figured you would be,
Yeah.
Matt. That's kind of why I got him. Because you're like, I'm doing the neighborhood watch. I was like, this will be perfect for you.
So yeah, we're doing working with the Safe Streets guys, and
Yeah, I am too.
oh, perfect. And then so what we
Look at that. You guys are all buddies.
I know. Like twice or the second Tuesday of every month we have our neighborhood meeting, and a lot of the times it's just unfortunately it's a lot of the older folk and then us, and like we're the youngest ones there, and I'm not young at all. Like so it's kind of that weird sort of thing. It's like I don't know, like is that maybe just a problem trying to get the younger crowd interested in the whole neighborhood thing, because everything is real macro right now, but people aren't necessarily looking into their own communities.
Dude, you're fearless when you're a kid. You don't care. Nothing's going to happen to you.
Yeah, and it's true. Like I said, I work with Safe Streets, did a couple presentations, coincidentally, with some groups last week, and often the older crowd, but once in a while you get youth, but you rarely see, the college kids.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you get a Boy Scout filling out a badge or whatever.
Yeah,
but-
and I think people are just busy. I know my disaster plan when I was that age was probably just to walk to my
you just don't
parents'
think about it
house
a lot of
and-
times, right?
Well, and
Yeah.
or when they're thinking about it, it's and I hate to use the word romanticization for it, but it really is. It's like, oh, what are you going to do during a zombie apocalypse? Well, I'm
Right.
going to go to Walmart, or I'm going to go to Dick's, and I'm going to go get all my stuff. And it's like, I don't necessarily think that those are solid plans anymore.
You don't think those work out?
No, I don't really think that's going to work out for you.
Not at all. So you need to be prepared for not having a supermarket to go to, not having your debit card work, keep cash, small bills. And I will say back to the youth, children are much more prepared than I think we give them credit for. When I run into some, or we might do a little presentation somewhere, young kids are pretty knowledgeable these days about what to do. So by the time they're in college, maybe we'll have a little different take on it. So I think
Hopefully. You always kind of hope for that.
I will say I've been impressed. They're on it, especially up the valley where there's some Lahar dangers from Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
Those kids are evacuating on a monthly basis.
Well, and people from anywhere else don't even know what that is, right? The Lahar. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah,
to
it's basically if there's a volcanic eruption, all that ice is going to instantly melt. You can imagine that debris is going to flow down the river valleys, and basically it's just an enormous mudslide.
Yeah, we live right under a volcano.
Yeah,
It's
that's-
super creepy.
Puyallup, hey, you're going to be suddenly just covered in like all of that, and you can look back at that at the 80 Helens eruption, and you can see just the rivers that were completely overflowed, and all these lands that were just completely, essentially, just taken out because of all of this.
Yeah, you can see all the trees still up there. You can just get a good sense of the force and power of that. Fortunately, it wasn't too populated, but our port of Tacoma is built right on top of mud flow from Rainier from the year 1504 or something like that. So
And that's crazy because is that the big one that you guys train for? Is it the eruption of Mount Rainier? Is it like the big 10.0 earthquake that we're supposedly going to have because of the way our faults work? Are those the big worries, or where are you guys looking at it with that?
the big one that we consider worst case scenario is the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. So that's basically a fault line, if you don't know, that runs from British Columbia, Canada, all the way down to Northern California, pretty much.
Oh wow, I didn't realize it
along
went that
the coast.
far.
Yeah, so when that one goes, that's pretty much what we're training for. That'll have several thousand casualties and just billions and billions of dollars in damage all along the coast of Oregon and Washington up into Canada. So that's we do a 5-year exercise by that name, Cascadia earthquake.
And that's the one everybody's planning for, right? Just from what I've heard, like NorWestCon, they have guys come in, emergency planning guys, and they said there's a whole country's kind of planning for that one to be the big one.
Yeah, because even though it just hits us here, you might be in Spokane thinking, I'm far from that, I'm good, but
Suddenly you have coastal property.
people are going to be leaving potentially permanently to places like Spokane, Bend, Oregon, for Portland. They're going to have to relocate and not necessarily come back in some cases. So there's a lot of research, a lot of good research going on, even right here, University of Washington, Tacoma and Washington, about modeling these things and how people are going to evacuate, who's going to come back and why. So we try to accommodate that into our planning on just predicting movement and the impact of these. So we're studying structural damage, nursing homes that are going to be evacuated. So there are a lot of things that you just don't really think about till it happens.
Does that ever just freak you out when you go to work? Like in the morning, 10 o'clock, you're like, oh shit, I hope it doesn't happen today. Like any other day would be great.
Didn't sleep too well. I hope today's not the day.
Yeah, I was going to say that my wife's going to be really mad when I tell her when I get home from this that we got to move. Because we just bought a house too. And we got to go to Utah.
Mine's on top of a hill. I think I'm kind of cool now, right?
Yeah, we don't want to scare people. And with modern construction, houses aren't going to just do that pancake collapse like you might see in the movies or even some other countries, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Things will react in their own ways. But with retrofitting for older buildings and just modern codes, they're meant to withstand some of these earthquakes.
And that's a kind of a really good point with like the retrofitting and stuff like that too, because my house was built in the 50s, and so we took a look at it, and it seems by and large fairly all right. But also at the same point, it's almost 70 years old for a house. A lot of Tacoma, especially, I mean, we're in the Union Club right now, which was built in 1888, and one thing I know for sure is that the wiring, and maybe not necessarily here, but in a lot of the older houses that are built in the early 1900s, the wiring is horrifying.
I thought you were going with ghosts. One thing I know for sure is it's haunted because we heard them today.
Yeah.
We were talking to them.
That's true. There's ghosts. The wiring is terrible, and you need to kind of make sure that like the foundation is good and all of that sort of stuff is, because the older houses. Not to say that they were built any worse than any house that was built now, but they're some of them over 100 years old. So you need to kind of make and pay attention to that sort of stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of these houses have made it this long, so that's saying they've
You're
probably
not wrong. You're not wrong.
So what we do see in these older buildings, it might be the bricks, it's chimneys that go down. You know, structure, the skeleton of the house is good. It's not going to collapse on you in most cases, but you know, chimneys, bricks on the outside. That's why when there's an earthquake, you don't want to go running outside, because then the things falling off of your building are more likely to hit you. So
Good point. Good point. You don't want to just run out there. You think
Are
you're
you
saying,
taking notes? You're like,
I'm
don't run
I'm
outside.
gonna be listening to this podcast like 3 or 4 times. I'll be like, yeah, okay, cool. I need to know this. I need to know this. I need to know this.
yeah, for the earthquake, remember the drop cover and hold on. That's the
And
basic.
pray.
Yep.
I remember what was it, like the 2000-2001 Nisqually Valley earthquake, and I remember that happened. I was living with Brogan at the time, him and his baby mama.
Aww.
No, there's no there. That was horrifying. But I remember I was sitting there playing a video game, and the earthquake happened, and I'm like, oh crap, what do I do? And it was, okay, well, I want to get into
The fetal position and start. No,
It's kind of true, actually.
But what I did is I went into a threshold, and then I looked up and I realized there's all this glass right above me because of the high vaulted ceiling in the apartment. I'm like, maybe I need to move somewhere else. So I went to the bathroom and stood in the threshold, and then it stopped, and I was very happy that it didn't collapse on me.
Yeah.
But it's that trying to figure out what's going on when it's happening. You've had to, from doing this for many years, kind of dealt with people trying to deal with the situation as it's occurring. Like, how do people what kind of things should people be telling themselves as it's happening to kind of keep themselves focused so then they can deal with everything else that's going on?
Yeah, you always, in the case of the earthquake, you just want to ride it out. I saw one somewhere recently, and I think it was a courtroom. Maybe you saw this video, and these young girls are just filming it on YouTube, and until the ceiling's literally like panels falling on them or near them, did they actually? So you don't need to record this. Everyone is experiencing it. It's really what you want to do is find the best place. Don't go running throughout your house to find a good table to hide under. If you have a sturdy table, get under that, hold on, cover your head, get in a corner of a house. We don't say doorways anymore. That used to be the old recommendation, because
I'm good that it wouldn't have worked for me then.
It is a structurally protected area, but the doors can swing and actually could cut your fingers off in some cases.
Jesus.
You don't.
Yeah, because
don't
you're
want
propping
that.
yourself up at that point. So if it comes in,
And bathtubs are great, but really, like you said, get away from glass that can break, things falling on you. So don't go crazy about finding that best spot. You're not going to have long, so just find a good safe spot where nothing's going to fall over on you, and ride it out, and you should be okay. And then you just want to focus on kind of situational awareness. Do you smell gas? Is there a fire? You don't need to go immediately turn off your utilities just because there was an earthquake. If you're not smelling a gas leak, for example, or seeing electrical sparks starting a fire, you don't need to shut down everything, because you never know if you'll get that back on again. If you're not able to do it yourself, the utility crews might not be out for weeks.
That's true.
If the whole city is out. So don't overreact. Just assess your situation.
No,
and
that's a really good thing to say, because it's just I'd like to say that I wouldn't panic,
Dude,
but
people freak out. This is probably the worst thing to admit, but I was doing research for this, and I ended up on YouTube, of course, and all I was watching was the prank videos where people put the emergency broadcast on people's TVs. Have you seen those?
No.
Oh, it's the worst thing ever. It comes on and it says, there's a bunch of them, but a lot of them are nuclear weapons. Oh, there's been like missiles launched from North Korea, and people lose their mind. A lot of people scream at the TV. It's like they'll just start cursing the TV and yell about the president. It's great. It's great to watch. But then other people people run into their kitchen and they start grabbing like all the snack food they can grab, and there's people running out
on my Doritos.
Dude, it's pretty funny to watch, but then it's almost sad a little bit. You're like, oh man, these people would be lost, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, man.
It's a good social experiment. I mean, put people on the spot. You see how people can react.
Well, and nobody thinks it's funny afterwards. After it's over, nobody laughs.
That's the prank no one likes. Well, and I mean that even just reminds me of what happened in Hawaii. There was the not the fake, but the trigger of the EAS, and they were like nuclear strike imminent sort of thing, like missiles are coming in, and some people were just like, yeah, we didn't call anybody. We're just like, well, this is what's gonna happen, and sometimes. And especially when it comes out to larger disasters, there's not necessarily anything you can do, especially when it's happened or while it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Some are predictable, like hurricanes. You'll watch the news and you can see those coming and their potential path several days out. For an earthquake, we are getting closer to what they call the early warning system. Mm-hmm. So basically, they have sensors placed throughout the state, and if let's just say there's an earthquake off the coast, it's going to hit one of these sensors. It's going to go to a relay center, and then send your cell phone an alert message. So
science and technology is kind of cool,
It's coming. It might be seconds up to a couple minutes. It just depends on how far away you are from the epicenter of the earthquake. But even 10 seconds doesn't sound like much. But if you're in the middle of a surgery, or you can find a safer place in 5 to 10 seconds if you have a little bit of warning.
And it lets you mentally brace for it too. And I think that's the biggest part there, because once you get that in, at least you can start kicking in problem solving skills if you have them. And some people just don't have coping mechanisms. They just run into thresholds and pray. But there are different ways you can go about that. So it's good. Now, I mean, obviously, we should be being prepared for stuff like the earthquakes, for maybe a lahar or anything like that. But you did mention that we recently, over in like the Port Orchard area, had a tornado. Now, how do you necessarily plan for something that you've never seen before? And you talked about the overarching things that you should have. Like, how do you prepare for that stuff?
Yeah, you just have to, like I said, call it the all hazards approach. So if there's a gas spill at the port, for example, a train crashes, you might get instructions to tape your windows, stay inside, much in the same way you were alerted when the forest fires were happening.
Yeah.
It's a little less severe, but it's the same idea. You got messages from public sources kind of instructing you on a health hazard. So you just kind of want to don't overcomplicate it with every possible scenario. You're either going to have to stay in your house or leave immediately. Those are probably the two choices.
You start there.
So just think, if I need to leave right now, and now I am left, what do I wish I would have grabbed?
Do you want Cool Ranch? What do you want?
Absolutely.
And it's like one of those things that also makes me wonder. It's like, gosh, man, I need to make sure and not wait until the last minute to fill up my gas tank. It's like, I'll just fill it up on the way to work sort of thing. And it's like, I literally do that every time. It's like, it's the most efficient way. And then you're thinking about it, and it's if you're a little bit more prepared, and you maybe not have to worry about that so much. And
yeah, absolutely. A lot of people run out of gas evacuating. If everyone's hitting the road at the same time, all of Western Washington, for example, you're not going to make it too far. You're not going to be able to get gas, at least in a lot of cases. So yeah, be mindful of that. You definitely want to have copies of prescriptions, that kind of thing, important documents. And sometimes it's just what information are you going to want to have when you have to replace your driver's license or passport, if, for example, you don't make it out with that, or at least have copies of those things. Any important information, points of contact. You want to have an out-of-area point of contact so you can contact someone, let them know you're safe.
I'm so glad my wife does all of this stuff. Like, she has the filing cabinet. She's like, I'm putting all of these things in here. I'm like,
You don't keep that stuff to the side in case you ever need a new identity?
No.
Why not, dude? You need to get with it.
Why do you need a new identity, Scott?
You never know, man. You never know what's going to happen. He's telling us right now.
That could be part of your grab and go bag.
So, a grab and go bag. I've heard about those. I've heard bug out bags is the same thing. It's like sort of thing. You're talking about like a little bit of cash, change of clothes. What are some of the other things that you would want in that?
Yeah, I mean, those are two good things. Absolutely. Maybe a bottle of water. You'll keep it where you can potentially get to it. You don't want this to be on the top shelf of your garage. The idea is maybe your place is on fire. I've got a bag under my bed just with extra shoes and some clothes. I'll be pretty goofy looking, but at least I won't be in my underwear, you know.
Well, I know, and that was like, I mean,
flashlight.
Dealing with, you know, I've had friends who have had, you know, there was a fire in their apartment and they left, and literally it was in their pajamas. Fortunately, they wore pajamas when they go to bed. You know, it's like there's one of those things you need that stuff just to have, because you don't know when something like that's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure, and it could just be a house fire. It's not always the earthquake. It could be something that just impacts you.
Dude, have you ever had a fire alarm go off in a hotel?
No.
And had to leave a hotel? It's one of the funniest things you'll ever see in your whole life. Unless you're mad. Unless it's like 2 in the morning and you're pissed off because you have to get to work. That's where I was. But you see just a lot of people not prepared for life, man. Dude, I'm serious.
Well, and that's like, I'm like having you on, like, and I'm really happy to have you on, Josh, because I don't want to like scare people and be like, oh, you know, it's like, it's inevitable. These terrible things are going to happen. Oh my God. But
they are. They are, man. You should be at least a little prepared for them, right?
Exactly, and that's the thing. There should be, at the very least, a small amount of preparedness, and like even just like doing the map your neighborhood with the quick 90-minute one, or hell, just listening to this podcast a couple of times, just because I'm going to be doing that.
Because we need the numbers. Download us a lot.
One time I was in Hawaii for work. I can't remember what island it was on, but there was a tsunami warning. And so like we're there, and we were on the lower floors, and they said, listen, we got everything just started going wow, wow, wow with red lights and everything. And the guy comes in, he goes, you know what, we need to get you on a higher ground because there's a tsunami warning. And it was like an earthquake in Alaska, and they said it's going to hit this island, it's just going to boom. So everybody goes back to their room, and I'm like I'm sitting there and I'm texting everybody, my family, saying, you know, this is what's happening. Everything's okay.
I love you. I can't swim.
You know, and so I'm texting, and one of my coworkers was kind of like a party chat, you know. So when she goes, well, I'm up on the top of the island. We took off, and I thought she's joking. I thought everybody's still in the hotel. I go, what? I go, you're joking, right? I said, you're still in the hotel? She goes, no, me and so-and-so and so-and-so, we got in a van, and
Peace out, Jeff. Dude, they ditched you.
Yeah, and I was freaking out. And so my son's working there, too. I go, where are you at? He goes, well, I'm in the upper floor with so-and-so and so-and-so. I go, you tell me if you leave. Do not leave me here. I said,
and that's like a big thing, communication, especially with your coworkers. Holy crap.
Exactly. And luckily, nothing happened. Like after about, they said it was supposed to hit about 2:00 in the morning, and I had a window seat to the ocean. So I was watching the waves, and nothing happened, you know, but still I was surprised that everybody took off. They said, oh, we're out, you know, and I said, well, what about Jeff, you know?
Did you make it awkward when they came back? Just stared at him? You just left me here. You left me.
I was just like, yeah, thanks for the heads up. Like, hey, anybody else want to go with us? We're going up the mountain. It was kind of freaky. But these people live in Florida, and I worked in Florida for 6 years, and they have hurricane parties. So they have bets on when they have like an office pool of when the hurricane's going to hit. But they do take care of themselves, because one of our coworkers lost their house. I think it was like Katrina or something like that. And during that whole time, they had like neighborhood barbecues because everybody's fridge was off. So they just brought in all their stuff and made like this huge gumbo. And they took care of each other. And they were out of power for like 6 weeks. Even people that were more in. And this is Central Florida. But they don't panic. You know, they're like, my son, he still lives there. He calls it hurricane parties. So when the hurricane's coming, they just pick a house, and they go and they bring beer, and they bring candles, and they bring lights, and they just sit there and write it out and deal with it the next day.
But that's awesome, though, because they're doing it as a community and getting it all together, as opposed to just ditching you at the hotel saying peace out.
Yeah, and it's great practice. You can imagine if we had an earthquake every year, people are going to be prepared.
Yeah.
It's that you hear it could be 500 years. I mean, technically we're approaching the window of historical possibility, but it's still a 500-year window.
Historical possibility sounds so terrifying.
That's so good. You know how he just keeps de-escalating everything? He's like, yeah, dude, no, don't worry. It's not a big deal. We're like, no, the world's going to end.
I mean, I see different stats, and maybe don't quote me on this, but but it's along the lines of a 10% chance in the next 50 years of a pretty major, let's just call it a pretty major earthquake, and about a 90% chance in the next 50 years of damage causing. I think there are 1,000 earthquakes a year in Washington. You just don't feel most of them, maybe 10 or 15 of those. And it's just about one of those every 5 or 10 years actually causes some serious damage. Like Nisqually is pretty much the last one. That was 2001. And we'll probably see something like that, before too long. But you just never know when the big one is
exactly
happening.
And it's like when you're prepared for the big one, then you will be also prepared for anything else that comes as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you can prepare for. Wait till we get that asteroid lady on. She's gonna tell us about those.
Are you booking asteroid
I
ladies?
am actually. That's not a joke.
Man.
I've got a lady who's she runs a foundation for the people that watch for asteroids that come in.
Really?
Yeah, it's
That's
really cool. They
I'm-
work with the university, so
Ooh, that'll be cool.
it's super scary, dude.
I'm like, this will be cool, and he's like, no, this is actually terrifying.
It's super terrifying. I was like, oh my god. Yeah.
Now, something else is like, if people want to find out more information, how do you find out the information about like the warnings and the alerts and all of those? Because sometimes it's kind of hard to navigate that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked. Definitely meant to talk about that. So if you're living in the Tacoma, Pierce County area, today, sign up for, it's called PC Alert, which is Pierce County Alert.
Oh.
Just search that online. It's easy enough. I think you get a number you can just text and it'll sign you up. And basically that activates your cell phone to receive alert messaging. And you can do email, landline. You can program it however you'd like to receive these warnings. So that's really the best thing to do. You may have seen the federal alert. I think they did a presidential test, and that hijacked everyone's phones, which that's kind of the national alert. But
it's
as far as local,
if stuff is really going down at that point,
but it's the same kind of the same functionality. Basically, Pierce County Emergency Management as well as City of Tacoma Emergency Management, we have access to the warning system, and we try to focus where these alerts go. You don't want to get a national alert if just Washington needs to, or just the Seattle area needs to evacuate.
Absolutely.
So we are very mindful of who's getting these messages. You don't want to cause unnecessary panic in areas that aren't impacted. So that's another challenge, trying to isolate these things to maybe specific cell phone towers, people in a certain area, people with certain landlines in a neighborhood. I mean, it could even be neighborhood by neighborhood if there's a gas leak, for example. You don't need to worry the whole. And if there's an evacuation, you just don't want to clog up the roads with people that really didn't need to leave their home. They received this message unnecessarily and took action. So
and now suddenly everybody's stuck on the road. Everyone has run out of gas, or they're filling up the gas stations with, maybe there's no power out there, or
absolutely,
just getting the backups and everything.
And you saw in the campfires, if you're stuck on the road and there's a fire raging, that's not good. So
no,
a
not
major
at all.
evacuation has to be like the scariest thing ever, right? There's just way too many people to get out of here. You know what I mean?
No, it's true.
I know, it's like you just think, oh yeah, everyone will just be able to get out on the roads. And what is the one thing you see in like every apocalypse movie is like all of the roads completely and utterly blocked.
Every morning.
Yeah, I
What
can't
is-
even get to work.
Right.
Yeah, I can't even get to work on a Monday morning. At 4:30 in the morning, that place is jammed up on the 167 and the 405.
That's exactly how it'll be. So another reason to have some food and water in your car, have a full gas tank. It's hard to keep up on this kind of stuff, but a little effort goes a long way. I'm sure I let my gas tank get below half, even though we shouldn't. Just
Oh man.
top it off when you have the chance, for sure.
You're freaking me out.
I know, it's just like I love it because you were absolutely right. Josh is like, no, everything will be fine. You can just work it out. And like Scott's over here getting more and more tense and freaking out.
You saw how I acted when that light came on upstairs.
Yeah.
Right? I panicked. I ran. I was out the door. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like we go through walking here with Josh at the beginning. He's like, "Hey, does this feel like there's a ghost here to you?" You guys are just running through with that. Yeah. So how do you emergency prepare there for poltergeists. But seriously, Josh, I mean, thank you so much. It's the Community Emergency Response Team. You're always looking for volunteers, correct?
Absolutely.
And so when somebody, like, from what can people do to help you guys with the volunteers? Because it's not all just about the emergency preparedness, but just kind of some of the back end stuff as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are volunteer opportunities all around the city. But for our part, we like to focus more on the disaster context. And like I said, we'll do street festivals, different things. In the end, you're a kind of an organized workforce. It's not always a, earthquake situation. It's just people that have worked together and have some skills, and if something were to happen, they would be ready to respond to that. So we've been a benefit to those. But there are other things like, the Red Cross, other ways to get involved, different community groups. But, for CERT, we want you to go take the training first, which is about 20 hours long. Typical class is Tuesday and Thursday evenings for 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
From about 6:30 to 9, and then we do a disaster drill on that following Saturday where we moulage, have victims, and simulate a disaster situation and practice kind of all the different things that we've learned. It's really fun.
And for anybody who is listening right now, I mean, if you look at your app, we'll have all the links for everything right on it. But also, you can go to our Facebook page, find all the links for this, and talk with to be able to talk with you, Josh, about this sort of stuff, and people hopefully helping out, or at the very least, getting prepared for something that may happen in their neighborhood, because everything is happening all over the world. There are terrible things happening all over the world, and sometimes people get overwhelmed by that. But you got to look local, and you got to look into your community and that sort of thing, and talk with people just to make sure that everyone's on, maybe not even on the same page, but at least you know each other so you can do something.
Yeah, there was a tons. I don't know. It can at least be found through your website. I don't know if it was exactly on your website, but I found tons of cool information just on the emergency response kind of websites out there. Like different flyers, different ideas you can do at home where you don't actually have to go take a class or anything if you can't do that, right? I saw somewhere there was a year program where it was like, do this, like it takes an hour a month, and at the end
prepare
of the
year.
in a year. What a cool idea that is.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different, every year we try to do different themes just to kind of keep the message fresh. But yeah, if you just get online, search Washington State Emergency Management, FEMA.gov, Ready.gov. Those are more the federal programs. But we're all trying to coordinate using the same information. You don't want to get mixed messages. So we're pretty much, we might have our own packaging on it and our local, stamp. But otherwise, we're definitely trying to, have a consistent message. So no matter where you are, whenever something happens, you know what to expect, and it's kind of prepared as you can be.
It's interesting on that sort of thing. I could just see the theme packages, because I know some of them have been doing it, have been kind of incorporating, or at least the lead in would be, so zombie apocalypse is coming. How are you prepared? And it's like one of those things. It's almost like a clickbait thing. It's like, oh yeah, zombies could happen. Aliens could attack. How am I prepared? And how do you feel about stuff like that? Because it seems at least a way to kind of get people interested.
And through the CERT group, we did an exercise. We opened up our Emergency Operations Center, which is just up the hill from here on Fawcett.
Oh, nice.
Fawcett. So we had about 20 CERT members, and it's a zombie apocalypse, but really it's kind of simulating a pandemic situation. What do you do if there's it's more fun because it's zombies.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It kind of simulate, had fake news about the zombies.
That's great. Should take them out to Dystopia Rising and let them go. There's a LARP out on the peninsula that does zombie LARP. Yeah.
So it's just a good way to practice, and it's a little more fun than
it makes it a little more
ice
interesting.
storm or whatever.
Yeah, right. Dude, Josh, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to throw out there before we let you go, buddy?
I don't know. I think we touched on a lot of good points. I just encourage people to start small. Don't get overwhelmed. Just every time you go to the store, maybe add a little bit more to your kit. And a lot of your camp gear might dual purpose as survival gear. So I don't want this to be intimidating to anyone. A lot of people are more prepared than they think. It's just good to get organized and really have a little more of a plan. But wherever you're at with your preparedness, I'm always here to help. So
awesome.
Hunt me down, or any number of people trying to do this same cause, and we'll get through it.
Yeah, this was really cool, man. Thanks for doing it.
All right. Well, thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much.
Good times.